Good morning. Thank you for joining me bright and early for Sustainable Apps, how to leverage change management to ensure successful user adoption and high ROI. How's the sound on this? Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I am Christy Lapidus. I'm the founder and principal of Corvo Consulting Group. I've been designing and developing on the FileMaker platform for over 15 years. And I am a technologist, an entrepreneur, a poet, a photographer. I also care very deeply about the world in which we live and the people in it. And that is why I'm here today to talk to you about change management. I'd like to start by first taking you through a brief journey of my personal work experience so that you can understand how I arrived at the idea, the point of view, that we as developers can leverage change management not only to improve the results of our projects, to improve ROI and user adoption, but also to have a positive impact on the world in which we live. I had the opportunity to start working at a very young age. I worked for small family-run businesses. This is my family. My sisters and brothers and I, when I was about 4 years old, we started working at a strawberry farm down the lane from our home in rural Indiana. And many of the kids in the community also worked on that farm. The farmer was a teacher in our community high school. He was a basketball coach. And he knew us as whole people. He knew our families. And he welcomed us to bring our authentic and vulnerable selves into work on his farm. We weren't just some kids working on his farm. We were his community members that he cared deeply about. And he created this space in which we were able to learn, to grow, and we came back every summer, worked through the hot summer days, and we loved it because he created this space that was highly productive, highly innovative, and we were highly engaged. Now that was the experience that I had, and I didn't have the words for it then. But studies show, now that I've, near my 40s, I've read studies that show that that is actually the case. And as I turned 8, I went to work in my father's small business. He was a civil engineer, and he and my mother had a small business that they ran together. They had about 10 employees. My sisters and brothers and I once again worked there. And my father created a nurturing environment that also had high expectations. And the combination of those two qualities created, once again, a safe space where learning was possible, where growth was possible, and that created high profitability for the company and highly performing teams. That trend continued throughout my career. So after college, I was a DBA at a commercial real estate company in Chicago. I had the opportunity there to work with this amazing team that there were about 6 of us. We were aged and ranged from 23 to 29 years old. And we had the autonomy to completely re-engineer the business processes of this $40 million real estate company. One of the team members, I'm still friends with many of the team members who formed there. One of them is here today. He's in the audience, Kyle Backer. And the feeling that I had when working on that team was like no other feeling that I've had before. And ever since I left NRC, I've been trying to recreate it. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not. It just depends on the environment in which you're in, if you can maintain that within your own team. So when I went to work for Soliant Consulting, that was the first time that I was introduced to the trusted advisor model. And the trusted advisor model states that contrary to popular belief, it is important to bring your authentic selves, to use empathy and active listening in your engagements with your clients to form trusting relationships. You don't just sell the dream and support the nightmare, right? You find out exactly what your clients need by trying to understand them, by trying to hear what they're saying, to listen for the emotion in their voice, to create a safe space where they're able to tell you maybe something that they're embarrassed about, maybe something that has a personal impact on their lives. And unless you know that, your system may not work properly. So it's really important to take that step, and I was really reinvigorated by this trusted advisor model. It proved to me in black and white, from a highly respected consulting firm, putting this information out there that yes, in fact, what I had lived throughout my previous work experiences, through my childhood, that is actually the case. And so I spoke about that at FileMaker DevCon 2013, how to be a consultant and not just a developer, about using active listening to through the requirements phase to find out what your clients need. And what was interesting is immediately after my session, I was offered a job in Western North Carolina, and that's what that picture is of. I moved from Chicago to Western North Carolina. I took the position because not only had my husband and I taken our honeymoon there 2 years before, randomly, or by fate, some might say, because I came to DevCon, I brought my whole self, I spoke from my heart, and that is what opened this new door for me. And I love my job at Soliant, but I wanted to go and follow my heart. And so I did, and that was a really great experience. It's brought me closer to understanding who I am and how I can give back to the world in a more positive way every day. So as the director of IT at Gaia Herbs, my team and I managed a 300-seat FileMaker Pro system. It integrated with our ERP system. We eventually replaced that ERP system, went through a whole 2-year implementation that finished on time and on budget. It had some errors when we went live, but it was on time and on budget, and it worked. And there were so many changes going on in the environment. The company grew from 150 people to 300 people in the space of 4 years. So for a small manufacturing company in a rural mountain location, that's massive, massive change. And I got to see a holistic viewpoint of what was happening on the project lifecycle. Because as a technology consultant, even as I was practicing active listening and empathy and forming these great relationships that were very profitable with my clients, I couldn't form those types of relationships with everybody that ended up using the systems in my client locations. At Gaia, I knew all the users of those systems. I knew things about their family, I saw them every day, and I saw the personal impact that technology changes had on their lives. It had an impact on their whole selves, sometimes on their families, and in turn, their personal lives had an impact on my technology projects. And it wasn't just technology projects. All of the organizational changes that were happening in that environment had an impact on people's personal lives. And their personal lives had an impact on the project. And so I figured, well, if we know what's going to happen, there must be some way to plan for it. Just like we plan for all of the technical changes, we can plan for the people side. So I started doing some research, and I found this whole field on change management. And I got certified as a change practitioner. I continued my research, and I started applying it, and I saw really great results that were happening. And so then I found this program at Pepperdine University called the Masters of Science in Organization Development. I applied, I got in, I'm halfway through the program now. The MSOD is a modern alternative to the MBA that focuses on the people side of change and strategy. The motto of the program is non nobis solum, which means not for ourselves alone. And so it ties that red thread back for me and for the world. It's a focus on managing business through the people side. So let's talk specifically about what we're going to cover today. We'll first look at the definition of organizational change management and why we need it. We'll look at barriers to effective change. We'll look at some change management strategies that are prevalent in the field. And then we'll take a quick look at a case study of a project management office that I instituted at Gaia Herbs using the analytical hierarchy process. And finally, recommended background. So I'm going to ask a few questions, a series of questions, and I'd like you to raise your hand if your answer is yes, and then keep it up until your answer is no. Who here among you works on systems and implements new systems that people use? How many of you want to do it better? How many of you want to do it faster? How many of you want to do it at a lower cost to you? And how many want to have a greater impact in the world? Okay, well, this session is for you. And it's not just for the system implementers out there, which we all are. It's also for the business owners, because as the world is changing around us at a rapid pace due to technology advances and globalization, every business owner has to know how to respond to change and to manage it. And so this session is for you as well. There are two approaches that you can take to managing change. You can look at it from a technical perspective, or you can look at it from a technical and behavioral perspective. And so I'm going to tell a little story to illustrate what that might look like. This is a story of Andrew. Andrew is a purchasing manager at a manufacturing company. Andrew's worked there for over 15 years. He loves his job. he has a routine that he's developed. So every morning, he wakes up, he gets to work at 8:45, he turns on his computer and he pushes a button. And the button creates a forecasting report out of FileMaker. And as this report is running, he goes and gets his coffee, comes back, and he then goes up to his boss's office with this printed out report. It's usually about 10 pages long. And he walks up to his boss's office, and they sit down and they strategize over this report. It's a forecasting report. It looks at all the raw materials that are going in to the production line. It looks at all of the products that have been produced. It looks at all the orders that have been filled over the course of the last week. And they strategize over this forecasting report every week. And they also have some time to chat together. They connect. It's the Monday morning, so they talk about their weekend, they talk about their kids, they talk about their families. And Andrew has actually gotten 2 promotions over the course of these very relaxed meetings with his boss, Melissa, the VP of Operations. So these meetings are really important to Andrew. And one day they're in there chatting away and strategizing, making good decisions for the company, and there's a knock on the door. Kendra, the IT manager, knocks on the door. She says, "Hey guys, I've got a really good news to tell you. The CFO has finally approved the upgrade of the FileMaker system. We're going to go from FileMaker 11 to FileMaker 17. You know, there's been so many technological advances over the course of this time. FileMaker 11 is no longer supported, and so it's going to take a lot of work, but we're going to go through this." Now, Melissa has some concerns because of budget and the time it's going to take from her people, but Andrew is actually really excited. Even though he has his routines, he's very excited about being able to start this new system, put in some new features that he's been waiting for. And so they start on the project together, they go through months of planning, going through all of these reports, or all of these requirements, and he's using his influence within the company to champion this project. And they get to the reports. We always leave the reports to the last, right? Maybe we shouldn't. Because what happens is we got to the reports, and Kendra, this is the most exciting part for her because she's like, "Andrew, we're going to use artificial intelligence, this awesome new technology, to replace that report. You're not going to need that report at all. It's going to be so efficient, it's going to predict what needs to happen, and you're going to love it. It's going to be great." Andrew stopped listening when he heard that his report is no longer going to be needed. His entire week is based off of working on that report. He's afraid that his expertise is no longer going to be needed. He's afraid he's not going to be able to meet with his boss and tell him what, and have this relationship that they've had. And he doesn't feel safe enough to say anything because he's in a state of shock and surprise at the end of this project, finding out that this is what's going to happen. And he probably has no choice. And so he doesn't say anything. But do you think that he's going to continue to support this project? Do you think that he's going to make time out of his busy schedule? No, he's not. In fact, he's going to use his considerable influence in the company to make sure that this project is not a success. Because he's got a kid in college, and he will not lose his job. And that's the only thing he can think about right now. And it happens all the time. And most of the time, you don't even know why it's happening. Because it's the people side, and we're not looking at that. Now, instead of only looking at the technical side, instead of waiting till the end to manage the idea of the reports having this impact on Andrew, what we could have done is from the beginning, look at the behavioral aspects. Take a look at the risks that might occur for the behavioral aspects of this project. So instead of surprising Andrew at the end, we create a safe space where he has the ability to talk things through and create a design. And what would happen is that his boss, Melissa, really values Andrew. And she decides that because he's going to get time freed up, she's going to actually give him some training, some managerial training. And it's going to be an advancement in his career, actually. And because of the new AI technology, which is really great, they're, instead of meeting on Monday morning, they're going to meet on Wednesday. And they're going to actually have 10 more minutes of time. And during that time, she's going to mentor Andrew on how to be a manager. And their relationship will continue and will even get better, if all goes well. So that's an example of how that might work. And this is the idea of applying behavioral science to project planning to increase your project success. What do we mean by project success? We mean that the project is on time, within budget, functioning as expected, adopted fully by users, and you get the expected return on investment. And ROI means you take the expected project benefits, which would be, a saving in time, for example, that Andrew's not going to spend all of this grunt work supporting the strategy, subtract it by the project costs, such as the IT manager's time in working on the project, and then you divide it by the project costs again, and that's ROI. I want to talk a little bit about what organizational change management is not, so that we're clear. It is not a change log. So, for example, you have Andrea, who's a developer, and she works in a highly regulated environment, and every time she makes a change, she has to go through and enter that change into a change log. That is not organizational change management. QA change control. Anybody know what QA stands for? Call it out. Quality assurance. Excellent. So, again, you'll see that in a highly regulated environment. If you haven't heard of it before, like at Gaia Herbs, they created organic herbal products, and so they were regulated by the FDA. Every step in the production process had to be managed by quality assurance, and any system that touched that process or supported it had to be managed through this quality assurance change control. That is not organizational change management. End user training. Again, it focuses on the people side, but it is not organizational change management. It might be a part of a change management plan. So let's think about some ideas of why. Let's look at some specific examples. Because life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. Lao Tzu said this in 2500 BC. 5th century BC, and 2,500 years later, it's still true. And in fact, we're experiencing change at an accelerated rate, a rate before that's never been seen in recorded history. And so because of that, what we're living in is a term called the VUCA World. Has anyone heard the term VUCA? If you have, you can say the words that make up this abbreviation out loud with me. Volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. The world in which we are living is changing every day. Blockchain, artificial intelligence, autonomous cars, virtual reality, augmented reality. Every second, every moment, our world is changing around us. And in the face of that, we have to remain agile. Now, the Agile Manifesto came out in 2001. It was published and created as a result to the software processes that were going on at that time. It was waterfall project management mostly, and also coders were being measured on how many lines of code they could put together, and what that meant was bloated systems were created. And so they came out with this idea of agile project management to take some of the ideas of lean manufacturing and create a system where you learn quickly, get working software out there quickly. That was quite a long time ago now. And in 2015, one of the original publishers of Agile Manifesto, Dr. Alistair Cockburn, came with this idea of the heart of Agile. And the heart of Agile is an idea that basically brings Agile back to its roots. You can see that there are some connections here with the idea of change management in looking at trust, experimentation, learning, change. There are some correlations there. And around the same time, in 2015, another thought leader in the Agile world, Joshua Kirievsky, came up with this idea of modern Agile. And what modern Agile looks at is these 4 tenets. Make people awesome. So we put people first always. And again, that relates back to this idea of change management. People are important. Deliver value continuously, and make safety a prerequisite. So just like in those small family businesses, it's happening in large enterprises where this idea of modern Agile is being put into place. Psychological safety, as well as a construction worker putting on his hard hat on the job site, psychological safety is just as important as that, because that allows you to experiment and learn rapidly. If people don't feel safe enough to experiment and learn rapidly, they're not going to be able to deliver value continuously. Another reason why, project failure. How are we defining project failure? Not on time, not on budget, and not functioning as promised. Now, I would add the ideas of user adoption and ROI here. However, this is from a study by the Project Management Institute. And so these are the results of that study. Has anyone here ever been on a project that failed? I have too. It wasn't fun, but I learned a lot. So what do we think are some of the causes of failure? Popcorn them out. Some ideas that you've seen or might, maybe on one of your friends' projects. Lack of engagement. Mm-hmm. Sorry, what's that? Continual scope creep. Mm-hmm. Lack of discovery or planning. Resistance to change. Changing management on the other side. Mm-hmm. Unrealistic expectations. Yes. Lack of testing. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's look at what the study showed us. Failure to set and manage expectations. So as we go through these, let's identify what's people side and what's technical side. Is this people or technical? People. Poor leadership. People or technical? People. Poor plans and planning processes. That's kind of in the middle. I think it could be both. Cultural and ethical misalignment. People. Misalignment with the business. People side. Inadequate communication. I could see a little bit of technical in that. Yeah, I saw some half C's there. Inadequate communication. People. So what this study from the Project Management Institute also published is the rate of failure. What do you think the rate of failure is on projects? Call out a number. 50, higher. 70%. 70% of projects fail. %70 of projects fail. And what we see is that if you apply change management, you can improve and create a project success rate that by 6 times you can improve that number. That's 6 times. So going from 70% failure rate, you can improve that by 6 times by using change management. Now, I'd like to take 4 minutes. We're going to do something a little bit unusual. We're going to have an interactive set point right here. So get closer. You might have to get closer to a neighbor. We're going to take 4 minutes. And for 2 minutes, each person is going to talk uninterruptedly about what challenges or opportunities in change management that you bring to this session today. It could be something that happened 20 years ago. It could be something you're facing now. Whatever it is that's coming up for you right now around change management. You get 2 minutes to talk about it to your neighbor, and then your neighbor gets 2 minutes to talk about it to you. Okay? I'll start the clock once people find neighbors. Okay, let's start wrapping up these conversations, and we're going to turn back. You've got 10 seconds. All right, thank you. Thank you. How'd that feel? It's my hope that you will continue these conversations after this session, and that if you do, this session will have been successful. We've talked about the why, we've talked about the what, let's talk about the how. First of all, you will encounter barriers to change because they're predictable. Resistance to change, we heard someone say that earlier, is a natural human response to change. Let's look at some reasons why. Loss of control. When we look at Andrew was afraid that this new technology, artificial intelligence, which you can learn about later in a session that's happening later today, by the way, by Johan Hedman, he feared that he was going to lose control of his ability to really control his supply chain because he didn't know, even understand what that technology was. There was a lot of uncertainty. He was surprised at the last minute, right before the project was supposed to go into development. And he feared a loss of faith that, in fact, his expertise was no longer going to be needed, and that maybe he was even going to lose his job. And he had a lack of knowledge about what any of that even meant, what all of this new technology was going to be. And then on top of that, what happens in projects often is that people are, besides the project manager, maybe the change manager, they're pulled off of their regular responsibilities to work on projects. And so they have to self-sacrifice in some way to make a project successful. And the only way that they're going to do that is if they want to, right? So here's a way that we can approach it. Many of you have heard of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the bottom of the triangle, we have physiological. People need food and shelter. They need safety, not just physical safety, but psychological safety. They need to have a sense of belonging, to feel esteem from their peers, their family, their colleagues. And then finally is the self-actualization that comes and that produces high-performing teams, that contributes to innovation, that contributes to high profitability. Now, what we've found, and studies show, is that these needs don't disappear on the commute into work. They don't disappear for your remote worker who feeds his child in the morning, puts him on the bus, and then goes to his office door and closes it, and he sits down at his computer. His needs don't suddenly disappear. He doesn't become a different person. So how can we have some strategies to actually put this into place? Well, first we're going to look at 3 different schools of thought on this, 3 different models of change. Kurt Lewin we'll look at first, John Kotter, and then Prosci. So the first 3 that we're going to look at are all staged processes. So it's looking at leaders leading individuals through change. The second 2 are more co-creative in nature. They're really just arising in the last 20 to 30 years, and they're taking a different approach. It's very interesting. I'm excited to share that with you. Kurt Lewin, 1947, the father of social psychology. He came up with this idea, and a lot of the work in change management came out of understanding how people process grief. And Kurt Lewin's did to a degree as well. And so what he found is that when humans are confronted with change, they go through this process of where they decide if they're going to unfreeze. So they look at the change and they go through a force field analysis, which can also be considered a cost-benefit analysis. They weigh the pros and the cons, and if the pros outweigh the cons, they will decide to change. And then they'll go through the process of actually making those changes and need some support along the way. And then they refreeze. And they try to maintain a state of equilibrium. That's what humans try to do, Kurt Lewin found. And then the cycle continues. So this is a fairly simple model that was put out in 1947, and most of the change models that you'll see today are based off of that in some way. John Kotter's, he was born in 1947, the same year that Lewin published his, and he published this in the 90s. It's an 8-stage process. If you read anything about change management, you'll read about Kotter. The first step is creating urgency. What Kotter recommends is that you do not create a false sense of urgency. It's not about raising people's anxiety through doom and gloom. Instead, you inspire them. You create an understanding for them to know why it has to happen now, and you inspire them toward that action. Next stage is to build a coalition. Then you form a strategic vision collaboratively with your coalition. And then you enlist volunteers. And this is also an important stage of the process, because in this area, you want to be sure that you're not just assigning people to do something, giving them one more thing to check off their list before they can go home to their kids. What you're doing instead is inspiring people to action because they want to make the change. And then once you get them on board, you empower them to actually make the change. You remove any obstacles to them actually making the change. Then you go through generating short-term wins, using an agile process to generating short-term wins. Once you get some short-term wins, you'll get more volunteers, things will start to grow, you'll sustain that acceleration, and then finally you institute the change. And what that final stage looks like is you tie rewards and recognition back to the results of the change. So for example, with Andrew's case, they were putting in this new system, and they needed people to enter orders into the order entry system. And so what you could do is create a contest where people could have and win prizes for entering orders into that system every day. And you publicly recognize people for their efforts every day in every conversation, whenever you see it, and people will begin to model that behavior that you reward in your environment. The next phase that we're looking at is the AdCar model of change. And this has been put out by a company called ProSci. ProSci is a portmanteau of the words professional and science. And they are very much based on research. So they have research analysts that have done thousands and thousands of studies on how people react to change and how we can help them through it. And so their model is called AdCar, and they have a lot of other things that go along with their model. And in fact, I have a book up here that is an extra book I have, so if anybody wants this book, they are welcome to it. It's by one of the founders of ProSci. And this is the change management that I'm certified in. So the first step that they talk about is awareness. It's important, just like Cotter says, of creating urgency, to create awareness. The second step is to create desire. And so this is the inspire part, if you relate it back to Cotter. People need to know what's in it for them. And studies prove this. What's in it for them? Let them know. Let them create it with you. Then you arm them with the knowledge that they need to approach this new change, whatever that might be. And the next step is ability. Now, I think this is a really interesting part of AdCar's model, because they draw this distinction between knowledge and ability. And knowledge might be something, let's say, for those people who are entering orders into the order entry system. We may have gone through end user training, done everything right, yet some of the people in those training, they may not have gotten actually how to do it. Maybe they have a different learning style, and the learning style that was used didn't work for them. Maybe they were sick that day. Maybe their kid was sick. People have a lot of things going on, and so what you have to do in the ability stage is actually test and make sure and confirm that people, after they have been given the knowledge, they also have the ability to do what needs to be done. And then finally, you have the reinforcement stage. And that can be tied back to the institutionalization stage that Cotter has, rewarding the behavior every day, every time you see it, and tying it back to job descriptions, to KPIs, to your institutional management. This is appreciative inquiry. This came out of Case Western Reserve University in the 90s by a man by the name of David Cooperrider. This is the 4D model, and the 4 Ds are dream, design, destiny, and discovery. I know it sounds a little vague, so what we're looking at here is a co-creative process where basically, instead of leaders leading people through change, as the other models were doing, what this is doing is actually creating a space where all of the stakeholders can come together, and in a method somewhat similar to what we did earlier, where you all were able to share your ideas together. You pair people up, you allow them to tell their stories, and you create a safe space for people to be able to express what their needs are, what they're going through, what they hope to see happen, and then you dream that up together. And it's a really neat process. I've been through it a few times in some community-driven work, and what it can create is really amazing. And so after you go through this process together, you then go through a design phase, and this is where you get very technical, and you put down exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then you create that destiny together. Now, after that is actually in place and you put your plans in place, then there is this stage of discovery. And that can be tied back to the institutionalization phase or the reinforcement phase, wherein you are making it a part of the institution. The difference is that the focus here is on appreciation. It's about creating an appreciative culture. And the idea, this focus on appreciation runs all throughout the cycle. instead of looking at issues that are, looking at things as if they're a problem. And in the Western world, we are programmed to look at things as a way we can solve problems. And that's how I look at most of life, right? Oh, I can use logic and apply it, and I can solve this problem. Appreciative inquiry says, let's appreciate what's actually already here, and then dream up together what can be possible without blame, without something being wrong, right? So instead, use appreciative inquiry. It's a really neat process that I would encourage you to read more on. And I have it in my reference list if you're interested. The last model of change that we'll look at is called viral, accelerated, or large-scale change. This is really an emerging process that's happening right now. And it's coming up because of what's happening in the world around us, the VUCA world that we're living in that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So you can see one of the shapes here is dual orgs. And Cotter is actually involved in coming up with some of these ideas. So he's using his 8-stage process and this idea of basically you have businesses that they go through a natural life cycle. You might start as a small company, and in that small company, things are done through relationships, through the networks that you have. People have to wear all kinds of different hats in a startup, right, to get things done. And things move at a fast pace. Things get done quickly, you can innovate quickly. And as the company begins to grow, as they're successful and profitable, there start to become hierarchies. People get assigned roles, other people report to them. You have to have accountability. You have to have all kinds of things that begin to form this very rigid hierarchy. It's efficient, it reduces risk. It does a lot of great things, but when forces come from that VUCA world to invade, it can't change quickly. It's too rigid. And so there's this idea of the dual orgs, where basically you set up outside, and this is in a large enterprise, once the business is at that stage, you set up a satellite company that is a startup, basically hanging off the side of your hierarchy. And it's made up of the people that are in your company, the volunteers that you've enlisted by communicating your strategic vision and creating that urgency. And maybe they create the urgency. Maybe they know what's happening and they come to you. So you set up that satellite outside of the hierarchy, and it reports back up to the hierarchy in some ways, but they are allowed the autonomy to create a safe space where people can act in basically a startup environment and create what they need to create without a lot of the hierarchy, using agile, co-creative processes. Now, these ideas are rather abstract and somewhat theoretical. So another way that we can look at it is, from a much more technical standpoint, you create change management plans. From the beginning, along with your project management plan, you create a change management plan. You look at the processes that are going to be impacted, and instead of just looking at what that means from a technical perspective and the business process flow and architecture, you also look at how is that going to impact Andrew's life? How is it going to impact his relationship with his boss when he can't meet with her every Monday? And you include, the boss and Andrew in these discussions so that everybody can talk about what's happening. And then you put that as part of the plan. You put in the budget. Oh, managerial training for Andrew needs to go in our budget from day one. And you implement this idea using continuous improvement. The change management plan is a living, breathing document. You don't want it to become cumbersome and to a point where you're just sticking to it because that's what you did in the beginning. It should use the methods of Kaizen, continuous improvement. And you also want to have governance. So this is important. Even in a startup environment, it's very important that you have standards that you adhere to. You have a certain way of doing things. Even if you're doing them quickly, whoever you're working with on your team, you agree to do them in a certain way. And one of the ways that you can do that is through a project management office. And a project management office will look at what that is exactly. It is a group that sets, maintains, and ensures standards for project and change management across an organization. It has been found that 38% more projects attain success via adhering to standards as set forth in PMOs. So that's from a study from PMI as well, 2017. We'll look at an example of a project management office portfolio. I know that's really hard to read. I have an example Excel file in the session materials that you can download. I set this up with the help of my team at Gaia Herbs, and it was very successful. It helped us to have clarity, transparency across the organization. When I first came there, the IT department had over 300 projects. Just for the software team alone. There were 4 people on that software team. So there was no way we were going to get to those projects. And the only way that I could see to make any sense of it was to put it in this portfolio, to apply what's called the analytical hierarchy process, which is a decision-making tool. A guy by the name of Dr. Thomas Sadie came up with this, and he actually created software called Decision Lens that you can use. You can buy it off the shelf. There's like 10 different pieces of software that do this. I just put it in Excel because I had no budget, and it was fast. I thought about building it in FileMaker, maybe will at some point, but what it does is you go through a list of decisions. In this case, we're looking at projects. And so you use the ranking process to say, okay, in this case of the first project here, we're looking at digital media initiative. So how does the digital media initiative that we're looking at, how is it going to impact our ROI in less than a year? And then you rank it from 0 to 1. How is it going to impact our ROI greater than 1 year from now? And you rank it 0 to 1. In this case, the Digital Media Initiative, whose project manager is Ada Lovelace, and whose project sponsor is the COO. It scores a 1 on both of these areas. And then you look at, okay, we also, what you do want to do with these portfolios is tie them back to your corporate strategy. So in this case, we have 2 strategies here that are business as a platform. How does this digital media initiative compare or rate against that impact that it will have on the strategy of business as a platform? In this case, it ranks as a 0.8. And then we look at another strategy. How does it rate against content as a king? And so on and so forth. We look at how it impacts our technology stack. We look at the effort that it's going to take to implement this project, because let's say you have a project that's going to take a 0.8 effort and a project that's going to take a 0.1 effort, and the 0.8 effort actually ranks above the 0.1 effort. You're going to slide that 0.1 effort in and get it done because you're agile, right? And you want to make good progress. And then this allows you to put in your scheduling, figure out when you're going to do things. Everybody knows what the budget is. It creates this transparent process where people, all the executives, the process that I set up is that every month, the executives who were on this team in the project management office met, and we went over every single project and we ranked them and we talked about their progress, and we also were able to ask for help. And so it was a co-creative process that got everyone on board and moving in the same direction. It also took a bit of work. It took a bit of time to kind of go through these things. And so it's important that you choose the right tool for the right job. Keep it agile. So I'm at the end. I'm a little early, but I want to leave you with this quote. Leaders must foster conditions under which everyone will do things because they want to, not because they have to. Thank you. I will not have session updates. I've got a lot of references that are in the materials if you want to read any of these books. And if anyone wants this change management book, please come up. Oh, questions? Questions? Does anybody have questions? Yes, please go to the microphone.
This is going to be a little bit long-winded to make my point, but please bear with me. I would venture to guess that at least half the people in this room are independent consultants who work from outside the organization with their customers. We've also seen a show of hands that everybody's run into the kind of problems that you described in your slides. It seems like some of these techniques, which, by the way, this is all fascinating to me and very valuable, so don't think that I'm criticizing, but I'm trying to figure out how this would fit in with someone like me who works outside of the organization. There's a certain firewall there. I can't, For example, if I were to walk into an organization from the beginning and say, okay, the first thing we're going to do is gather everybody in the room and create a safe space, the owner of that company sitting there thinking, how much am I paying for this? You know, so I wonder how we apply this, you know, if you're in a position like mine and many of the people here.
Sure, you know, you're absolutely right. And thank you for asking that. So I am in the process of building these types of things into my own independent consulting business. And what I've found that helps is that from the beginning, you ask, well, first you have to educate yourself, and that's what I'm doing, into what all of this means and how it can be applied. And then, now that I'm, you know, going into new situations with new clients, it's a little harder with older clients because they have a certain way that they've been working. Like, I've been working with a client for 10 years, and I'm trying to work it in with her, but it's taking a lot of time because she's used to working with me in a certain way. So there's a change management that has to occur with that. But with new clients, it's actually kind of easy. I mean, I haven't implemented, you know, full scale, but even little changes can make a difference. And so what I'm doing is I'm going in, and from the beginning I'm asking questions that are not just related to the FileMaker system that I'm looking at. I'm asking questions about their business. I'm asking questions about what risk they're facing. I'm asking questions that I know they're probably seeing. You know that things happen, like all of you know these things too, right? You're experiencing these issues now with change management. So use your knowledge of those things that you've experienced and use them to ask questions of your clients. And then when they, you know, see that you have knowledge, that you understand what they're going through, they'll be open to you being their trusted advisor in that way as well, not just on FileMaker, but on anything that you're able to offer your expertise on.
Thank you.
Actually, been in a situation where change management isn't to foster great relationships with the participants. It's about FTEs, removing full-time equivalents. And so many of the software projects were designed to eliminate jobs. Had that happen in the school world, and I had it happen in the financial world. So how would you apply a change management strategy to something like that?
That's also a really great question. So the thing in that situation is, so what's important is to see people as whole people. They're not just workers, right? They've been a part of your organization probably for many, many years. They've given their time, taken time away from their family most likely to participate and give to the organization. And so they deserve to be treated well during this transition. And so whatever that means, you find some budget, however small, to address the people side. You find some way to make sure that if you can't offer them paid training, you find some free training for them. You assign someone within the company to where they can talk about what's happening, where they're able to express their fears, their anger, and someone is there to listen for them. Or you assign, you know, they have the employee management programs out there, the employee assistant programs. You set that up as part of the transition out. Because these things happen, and as technology advances, they're going to continue to happen. So just be human, you know, just be human.
Far too much walking around this hotel this weekend. So do any of the resources that you have provided address an objective way to assign the rankings to the difficulty and overall impact on that grid that you displayed?
You know, that's a question. I did not include the analytical hierarchy process on there, and I can update the materials with that. It's really very valuable. All right, well, thank you all very much.